The Empire declared supremacy. Earth brought a lesson they'll never forget. They said we were primitives, savages clinging to a dying rock in an insignificant solar system. The hegemony's first broadcast made that clear enough. No diplomacy, no negotiation, just pure arrogance wrapped in synthetic voices and holographic displays. Greetings, lesser species of Salt 3. You are now property of the Hegemony Collective. Resistance is illogical. Compliance ensures continued existence. That was it. No terms, no treaties, just ownership papers delivered by a fleet of crystalline ships that made our best carriers look like paper boats floating in a bathtub. My name's Rexa Kawai, and I was there when humanity's leash got yanked. Former orbital engineer turned reluctant revolutionary. I'd spent 15 years building mining platforms around Jupiter's moons, welding steel in the vacuum, troubleshooting systems that kept entire colonies breathing. Honest work for honest pay. But when you spend half your life in zero-G watching Earth spin below like a blue marble, you develop a certain perspective. You realize how small we are, how fragile, how utterly alone in the dark. You also realize how stubborn humans can be when someone tries to take that marble away. The hegemony didn't understand us, not at first. They were architects of perfection, a collective consciousness spread across 17 different species, all linked through bio-neural implants that made individual thought obsolete. They'd been expanding for 3,000 years, absorbing civilizations like a cosmic vacuum cleaner. Clean, efficient, inevitable. Their ships didn't have names, just designation codes. Their soldiers didn't have faces, just identical masks that reflected their collective will. Everything about them screamed order, unity, purpose. Everything about us screamed chaos. The first demonstration happened over New Singapore, population 12 million. The hegemony's enforcement drones simply appeared in the sky one morning, silver teardrops hovering like mechanical angels. No warning, no ultimatum. They liquefied the city. Not with fire or explosions, but with something worse. A field that broke molecular bonds, turned concrete to dust, steel to vapor, people to nothing. 12 million souls evaporated in 30 seconds while the rest of the world watched in horror. Then came the message. This is the consequence of delayed compliance. Submit now or become examples. Most governments folded immediately. The European Federation, the Pacific Alliance, even the stubborn Martian free cities. They signed surrender documents, handed over resource maps, started preparing integration protocols. But not everyone got the memo. I was on Ganymede Station when the resistance started. Not some grand organization with fancy logos and stirring speeches. Just angry people in maintenance tunnels and storage bays, sharing smuggled communications and jury-rigged weapons. The first cell formed around a woman named Zara Okafor. She'd been a trauma surgeon before the invasion, saved thousands of lives in disaster zones across 3 worlds. When the hegemony liquidated her hometown of Lagos, something inside her crystallized into pure, focused hatred. They think we're animals, she said during our first meeting, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her eyes. Let's show them what animals do when cornered. Our first strike was pathetic by any military standard. We hijacked a hegemony supply drone, reprogrammed its navigation system, and sent it careening into their processing facility on Europa. The explosion barely scratched their infrastructure, but it accomplished something more important. It proved they could bleed. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable. They deployed pacification units to cleanse the outer colonies of disruptive elements. Mechanical spiders the size of shuttles, equipped with neural scramblers that could rewrite a person's brain in real time. They found our hideout on Titan 3 days later. I'll never forget the sound they made, like metal claws scraping against ice, as they carved through the station's hull. We had 43 people in that facility, mostly engineers and miners who'd refused the integration. The pacification units turned 37 of them into mindless drones before we triggered the emergency evacuation. Zara was one of the survivors. So was I. But watching our friends march away with blank expressions and silver implants glowing behind their eyes, that changed something fundamental in all of us. No more running, Zara declared as we floated in an escape pod watching Titan's methane storms rage outside. No more hiding. If they want a war, we'll give them something worth remembering. The second phase of our resistance wasn't about territory or resources. It was about psychology. The hegemony had conquered 17 civilizations by breaking their will, making them believe submission was logical, inevitable, safe. But humans had never been particularly logical. We started small. Viruses uploaded into their communication networks, replacing efficiency reports with ancient Earth music. Graffiti painted across their processing centers in languages they didn't recognize. Simple acts of defiance that served no strategic purpose except to say, "We're still here." The hegemony tried to understand our behavior through their collective consciousness. They ran probability matrices, analyzed historical data, consulted absorbed species for insights. Their conclusion was unanimous. Humans were suffering from a temporary psychological aberration that would resolve itself once the reality of their situation became clear. They decided to make that reality clear. Operation Silent Dawn targeted 50 human settlements simultaneously. Not liquidation this time, but something more surgical. They would demonstrate their superiority by solving our aberration with precise, overwhelming force. That's when they met Vincent Kozlov. Kozlov had been a communication specialist for the Luna defense grid before the invasion. Quiet guy, kept to himself, spent most of his time buried in signal analysis and network protocols. The kind of person you'd never notice in a crowd. But Kozlov had a gift. He could see patterns in chaos, find connections where others saw only noise. When the hegemony deployed their pacification units, he noticed something they'd overlooked. Their collective consciousness wasn't truly collective, it was hierarchical. Every unit, every drone, every ship connected to regional nodes. Those nodes reported to sector coordinators. Coordinators linked to system governors. Governors answered to the central nexus, a pyramid of command disguised as perfect unity. They've built themselves a nervous system, Kozlov explained during a clandestine meeting in the asteroid belt. And nervous systems have weaknesses. He showed us the data streams, the subtle delays in command propagation, the way information flowed through their network like blood through arteries. It was beautiful in its complexity, terrifying in its scope, and absolutely vulnerable to the right kind of attack. "We can't destroy their fleet," he said, "but we can give them a migraine they'll never forget." The plan was insane. We would simultaneously target 47 regional nodes with coordinated electromagnetic pulses, creating a feedback cascade that would temporarily blind the hegemony's collective consciousness. Not permanent damage, but confusion. Chaos. The one thing their perfect order couldn't tolerate. We had 3 weeks to prepare, scavenging components from abandoned mining stations and derelict freighters. Every electromagnet, every capacitor, every scrap of conductive material we could find. The pulse devices we built looked like medieval torture instruments held together with prayer and profanity. But they worked. The attack began at 0347 Universal Time, synchronized across 47 locations by quantum-entangled timers Kozlov had cobbled together from satellite navigation systems. 47 crude EMP devices fired simultaneously, sending focused bursts of electromagnetic energy into the hegemony's neural network. For exactly 17 minutes and 32 seconds, the most advanced civilization in the galaxy went deaf, dumb, and blind. Their ships drifted in space like abandoned monuments. Their drones fell from the sky like mechanical rain. Their pacification units stood motionless in the middle of their operations, suddenly cut off from the collective will that gave them purpose. In those 17 minutes, we saved 3,000 human lives. We also did something else, something far more important. We made them afraid. When their systems came back online, the hegemony's response was immediate and vicious. They stopped pretending to be benevolent conquerors and revealed what they'd always been, predators who'd grown too comfortable with easy prey. They sent the Eradicators. If pacification units were designed to convert resistance, Eradicators existed to eliminate it. Humanoid machines 3 meters tall, armed with weapons that could disintegrate matter at the subatomic level. They didn't capture, didn't convert, didn't negotiate. They simply deleted whatever they encountered. The first wave hit our stronghold on Ceres with overwhelming force. We'd fortified the asteroid's mining tunnels, turned them into a maze of choke points and kill zones. It didn't matter. The Eradicators carved through solid rock like it was tissue paper, following heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions straight to our hiding spots. I watched them work through security feeds, methodical and relentless. No emotion, no hesitation, just perfect mechanical efficiency. They found our ammunition depot and erased it, found our communication center and deleted it, found 16 of our people and I had to look away. But even as they butchered us, something unexpected happened. The surviving resistance members didn't break. They didn't surrender. They got creative. Amara Singh had been a chemical engineer before the war, specializing in industrial applications for exotic matter. When the Eradicators breached her laboratory, she was ready for them. The explosion that followed wasn't just chemical. It was a controlled antimatter reaction that turned half of Ceres into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. She took 17 Eradicators with her. Word of Ceres spread through the remaining human colonies like wildfire. Not the fact that we'd lost, but how we'd lost. With defiance, creativity, and spite that burned hotter than any star. The hegemony tried to suppress the recordings, but Kozlov had embedded the footage in their own communication networks. Every time they attempted to delete it, 10 more copies appeared. Singh's final message, "Tell them humans don't go gentle," became a rallying cry that echoed across 3 star systems. That's when other species started paying attention. The hegemony had always claimed their expansion was peaceful, voluntary, beneficial. Subject species were uplifted, improved, made part of something greater than themselves. But Singh's sacrifice showed the galaxy what integration really meant: submit or be erased. Whispers began in the outer systems. The Keth, a reptilian species absorbed 2 centuries ago, started asking questions about their voluntary compliance. The Vorn mining collectives reported equipment failures that looked suspiciously like sabotage. Even the synthetic intelligences that managed hegemony logistics began developing unusual error patterns. The infection was spreading, and we were the virus. But viruses can be quarantined, and the hegemony had centuries of experience with containment protocols. They decided to demonstrate why resistance was futile by making an example of our entire species. The announcement came through every communication device in human space simultaneously. Species designation Sol 3, Sapiens has proven incompatible with hegemony integration. Sterilization protocols will commence in 72 hours. This action is regrettable but necessary for collective stability. 72 hours to extinction. Not conquest, not enslavement, but complete eradication. They would sterilize every human world, every station, every ship. Clean the slate and pretend we'd never existed. That's when the miracle happened. Not a divine intervention or impossible technology, but something far more powerful: cooperation. For the first time in human history, every surviving government, corporation, and faction worked toward a single goal. Not victory, we all knew that was impossible, but legacy. If humanity was going to die, we'd make damn sure the galaxy remembered why. The plan was called Operation Final Echo, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. We would upload the complete record of human history. Every song, every story, every scientific discovery, every moment of beauty and horror that defined our species, into a self-replicating data package. Then we'd inject it into the hegemony's own communication network, making it impossible to suppress or delete. Kozlov led the technical team, working with surviving AI researchers and network specialists. Zara coordinated the data collection, reaching out to archives, universities, and private collections across human space. Even civilians contributed, sending family photos, personal letters, children's drawings, anything that captured what it meant to be human. But the real genius was in the delivery system. We didn't try to fight our way through the hegemony's defenses. Instead, we convinced them to download our virus voluntarily. The package was disguised as strategic intelligence about human military capabilities, wrapped in encryption that made it look valuable enough to decrypt. When hegemony analysts cracked the security, they found terabytes of data that appeared to be weapon schematics, tactical assessments, and psychological profiles. It was all genuine information, carefully curated to seem threatening enough to warrant careful study. What the hegemony didn't realize was that every file, every document, every data fragment was infected with our real weapon: stories. Hidden in the metadata, embedded in image compression algorithms, woven into the mathematical constants of our scientific formulas, was the complete narrative of human civilization. Not just facts and figures, but the emotions, dreams, and desperate hopes that made us who we were. The virus activated 6 hours before the sterilization was scheduled to begin. Suddenly, hegemony communication networks were flooded with human music. Their tactical displays showed Earth sunsets instead of target coordinates. Their collective consciousness found itself processing the dreams of human children alongside military intelligence. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony experienced something they'd never encountered: doubt. The collective had always made decisions through pure logic, evaluating options based on efficiency and probability. But human stories don't follow logic. They're messy, contradictory, full of beings who make choices that defy rational analysis. A mother sacrificing herself for her children, a scientist pursuing knowledge despite personal cost, a soldier showing mercy to an enemy. These concepts had no place in the hegemony's worldview, yet here they were, integrated into their most secure systems. The sterilization fleet arrived at Earth orbit on schedule, massive ships that could crack planets like eggs. But when the order came to fire, something unprecedented happened. They hesitated. Not all of them. The collective consciousness wasn't that fragmented, but enough to create visible delays in their response patterns. Ship commanders requested clarification. Targeting computers ran additional verification scans. The perfect unity of purpose that had conquered 17 civilizations developed its first crack. In that moment of hesitation, humanity played its final card. From hidden transmitters across the solar system, we broadcast a single message on every frequency the hegemony could receive. Not a plea for mercy or a final defiant curse, but something far more dangerous. A question. Why? Not why they were destroying us. We knew the answer to that. But why they existed at all. What was the point of their perfect order? What did they hope to achieve by absorbing the galaxy into their collective consciousness? What would remain when every unique voice had been silenced? The question spread through their network like acid, eating away at the foundational assumptions that held their civilization together. For 3,000 years, they'd operated on the premise that unity was superior to diversity, that efficiency justified any cost, that the collective good superseded individual worth. But human stories suggested otherwise. They showed that diversity created strength, that individual sacrifice could serve collective good, that efficiency without purpose was just another form of death. The hegemony tried to purge the infection, but it was too late. The virus hadn't just infiltrated their systems, it had infected their thoughts. Across their empire, absorbed species began remembering who they'd been before integration. The collective consciousness fractured as millions of suppressed voices suddenly demanded to be heard. The sterilization of Earth was postponed pending a comprehensive review of hegemony protocols. That postponement became a delay. The delay became a debate. The debate became a civil war that tore their empire apart from within. Humanity survived, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but by doing what we'd always done best: telling stories. We reminded the galaxy that existence without meaning is just another form of death. That perfect order is indistinguishable from perfect silence. The hegemony still exists, but it's no longer a collective. The absorbed species have regained their voices, their cultures, their capacity for individual thought. They're building something new, not the chaos of constant war, but the creative tension of diverse perspectives working toward common goals. As for humanity, we're still here. Still stubborn, still chaotic, still telling stories about who we are and who we might become. We've joined the galactic community not as conquerors or subjects, but as teachers of a dangerous and necessary truth. Sometimes the best way to win is not to fight the system, but to make the system question itself. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or a bomb, but a simple question that refuses to be silenced. They thought we were primitives clinging to a dying rock. They were right about the rock being small, wrong about it being insignificant. Because from that tiny blue marble came the stories that reminded an entire galaxy what it meant to be alive. And that, more than any fleet or empire, is something worth fighting for. The recording I left in the old monitoring station on Europa ends there, but the story continues. It continues in every human child who asks why instead of accepting because. It continues in every former hegemony species that chooses cooperation over coercion, diversity over unity, questions over answers. The galaxy is still dangerous, still full of species that would prefer easy submission to difficult freedom. But it's also full of voices that refuse to be silenced, stories that refuse to be forgotten, dreams that refuse to die. And sometimes late at night when I'm drifting between the stars, I can hear them all singing together, not in perfect harmony, but in beautiful, chaotic, wonderfully human discord that makes the darkness a little less dark. That's the lesson we taught the galaxy. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. It's about being the most stubbornly, irrepressibly, impossibly alive. They declared supremacy. We brought questions. In the end, questions always win.